sputtering bulb casting long, trembling shadows that danced like specters on the peeling walls. Around him, pages scattered like fallen leaves, their edges curled and stained with the ink of his fevered rewrites. His fingers trembled as they sifted through the script's fragments of a story that refused to stay dead. He glanced up, eyes haunted and hollow, as if the darkness behind his gaze held the weight of years of regret. The ghostly murmurs that filled the theater were not imagined. They were echoes of a past he could neither escape nor fully remember. A cold draft whispered through the broken windows, carrying the faintest hint of a voice soft, accusing, lingering like smoke in a room long since burned. Footsteps echoed lightly, hesitant, and Clara appeared at the edge of the stage. Her presence was a fragile thread of warmth in the icy desolation. She stepped closer, her soft features etched with worry, eyes alight with a fierce tenderness born of desperation. "Elias," she breathed, voice trembling yet steady, "you have to stop this. This place is killing you. You're killing yourself." He shook his head slowly, a bitter smile twisting his lips. "I can't," he whispered, voice cracked by exhaustion and denial. "Not yet. Not until I make it right." Clara's eyes glistened with unshed tears as she reached out, fingertips brushing his arm, an anchor thrown into his storm. "You're drowning in ghosts," she said softly. "Let me help you float." But Elias recoiled, the ghost of a shadow flickering behind his eyes. "There is no help," he murmured, voice fading. "Only this. Only the play, the fire, the pain. I have to see it through." Before Clara could respond, the sharp click of polished shoes echoed through the theater's hollow bones. Marcus emerged from the shadows, his silhouette sharp and imposing against the crumbling backdrop. His eyes were cold, judgmental, burning with the fire of practicality and bitterness. "Stop this madness, Elias," Marcus barked, voice slicing through the fragile moment. "This theater, this obsession, it's a ruin, and so are you. You're destroying what little you have left. I'm closing this place down if you don't pull yourself together." Elias's eyes flickered with a flash of anger, but it was quickly swallowed by despair. "You don't understand," he said hoarsely. "This is all I have left. The play, the ghosts, they won't let me go." Marcus scoffed, stepping closer. "You're a prisoner of your own guilt. Let go, or be consumed." The tension thickened, the air heavy with unspoken accusations and shattered dreams. Then from the periphery, a pale figure emerged, ethereal and haunting. Aidan, the lead ghost, his eyes deep wells of sorrow. His stage costume hung in tatters, drifting like smoke around him. Elias froze, the weight of Aidan's gaze pressing upon him like a physical force. The ghost's torment was no longer distant. It was immediate, suffocating. The past and present collided in a storm of memory and pain. "Why do you keep us here?" Aidan's voice was a whisper and a roar, filled with anguish and accusation. Elias's breath hitched. "I'm trying to fix it," he said, voice barely audible. "You're only binding us tighter," Aidan replied, eyes darkening. "This cycle, this endless repetition, it's your prison as much as ours." The theater seemed to pulse with their shared pain, the walls trembling as if alive. Elias's mind fractured, swinging between clarity and chaos. He saw the faces of those lost his wife, his friend etched in spectral light. He felt the unbearable weight of guilt crush him, and yet the flicker of hope, fragile and fleeting, whispered of redemption. Clara stepped forward again, her voice breaking through the tempest. "Please, Elias, choose life, choose peace." But Elias only shook his head, lost in the fractured reflections of his soul. Marcus watched, his expression grim. "You're spiraling," he said coldly. "And I won't let you drag everyone down with you." The tension snapped like a taut wire, the theater echoing with the sound of a man breaking inside. Elias's world shattered into fragments, past and present, reality and nightmare, love and loss all colliding in a kaleidoscope of pain. And yet, somewhere in the chaos, a faint ember glowed, a promise that even in the deepest despair, the possibility of redemption might still flicker. But for now, Elias was lost, caught in the fracture of his own making, the haunted echoes of the stage that burned forever. The night stretched on, the theater breathing its heavy, sorrowful breath, waiting for the dawn that might never come. The air in the ruined theater thickened, pregnant with a silence so dense it felt like a living thing. Elias Monroe stood center stage, his breath shallow and ragged, eyes fixed on the splintered rafters above. Then, as if summoned by his torment, the shadows flickered and danced. The faintest glimmers of spectral flames licked the broken beams, casting a ghostly glow that pulsed with unnatural life. From the darkness, the actors emerged pale, translucent, their faces etched with the torment of final moments lived over and over. Adon, the lead ghost, stepped forward first, his ethereal costume tattered but unmistakable, his haunting eyes locked with Elias's, reflecting a storm of accusation and sorrow. The theater filled with the tremulous echoes of screams and shattered hopes, a chorus of pain that clawed at Elias's heart. The flames spread, swirling in impossible patterns, illuminating the faces of the spectral cast as they reenacted the catastrophic fire that had consumed them. Lena moved silently among the chaos, her hands reaching out to touch the crumbling walls, the coldness of ash and ruin seeping through her fingers. Her expression was one of mute grief, a sorrow too deep for words. She was a ghost bound by memory, mourning what could never be reclaimed. Elias staggered forward, compelled and terrified. He reached out to Adon, whose gaze softened momentarily into something almost like forgiveness. But the weight of unspoken blame hung heavy between them. "Why do you still come back?" Elias whispered, voice cracking. The ghost did not answer but instead turned toward the flames, beckoning Elias to witness the destruction once more. The theater's atmosphere thickened, the boundary between past and present dissolving. The heat of the phantom fire was felt on Elias's skin, an inferno of memory searing through his flesh and soul. The screams of his lost wife and the original cast echoed in his ears, a relentless reminder of his failure and guilt. Each scene unfolded with terrifying clarity, the actors' movements a painful dance of agony and regret. Harold, the ghostly stagehand, appeared by the trapdoor, his form a shadow among shadows. His voice was a fragile murmur, threading ancient secrets of the theater's spirit through the chaos. "The place remembers," he whispered, "and so do we." Elias's mind teetered on the brink of collapse, torn between the desire to flee and the compulsion to witness every moment. His obsession had summoned this living nightmare, and now it demanded reckoning. The ghosts were not merely phantoms of the past, but fragments of his own fractured soul, each carrying a shard of the pain he refused to face. The flames flickered wildly as the spectral actors reached the final, tragic moments of their story. Elias's vision blurred, tears mingling with sweat as he realized the cycle was more than repetition. It was a prison forged from his own guilt and denial. Yet beneath the despair, a fragile ember of hope flickered a chance, perhaps, for redemption through the endless night. As the last echoes of the fire died away, the theater fell into a heavy silence, broken only by Elias's ragged breathing. The ghosts lingered, their faces etched with sorrow and longing, waiting for the next rewrite, the next performance that would either set them free or bind them forever. Elias sank to the floor, the weight of memory pressing him down. "I will find a way," he vowed to the shadows, "somehow." But as the darkness closed in, the question remained, how much of himself would he lose before the nightmare finally ended? The theater's walls seemed to pulse with quiet anticipation, the stage that burned forever alive with the ghosts of yesterday and the fragile hope of tomorrow. The theater was silent. Not the kind of silence that follows the frantic bustle of a scene's end, or the whispered muttering of actors preparing backstage, but a heavy, oppressive quiet that seemed to settle into every crevice of the ruined hall. Dust motes floated in the thin shafts of pale moonlight that slipped through the broken windows, casting long shadows across the cracked floorboards and peeling walls. Elias Monroe sat alone in the center of the stage, his fingers wrapped loosely around the worn edges of his notebook. For once, it remained closed. The air was thick with absence. The ghosts, those spectral remnants of a past saturated in pain and regret, lingered just beyond clear view, faint, flickering figures caught between worlds. Adan, the lead ghost, drifted slowly into the spotlight's ghostly glow, his pale form outlined against the darkened backdrop. His eyes, deep pools of sorrow and accusation, locked onto Elias with a silent intensity that made the playwright's heart constrict. Elias's breath came slow and uneven. The compulsive itch to rewrite, to reshape the past through endless pages scrawled in fading ink, had finally ebbed. Instead of the frantic scratching of pen on paper, there was only the whisper of silence and the distant echo of memories too heavy to bear. The ghosts were not silent, though. Their presence was a palpable weight, in the still air a chorus of unspoken grief and longing. Lena, the delicate actress whose spectral form shimmered like a fragile wisp of smoke, moved silently through the shadows of the wings, her eyes cast downward as if mourning an irretrievable loss. Harold, the stagehand ghost, glided through the aisles, his indistinct shape a reminder of the theater's enduring spirit, both a witness and prisoner of the unfolding tragedy. Elias's gaze drifted upward, taking in the tattered curtains hanging limply, the broken chandeliers swaying faintly as if stirred by an unseen breath. The theater was a mausoleum of shattered dreams, a monument to an ambition that had consumed everything it touched. For a long moment, he simply sat, the silence pressing in around him like a physical force. His mind, usually a torrent of ideas and frantic revisions, slowed to a tentative stillness. The weight of his failures, the lives lost, the love destroyed, the art that had devoured him settled over him like ash. Why, he whispered, voice raw and fragile, did I keep writing? Adam's form shifted closer, the faintest outline of a gesture, an extended hand, a plea for acknowledgement hovering in the air. Elias's eyes filled with tears, the dam of long-suppressed guilt breaking free. The ghosts did not need words. Their presence said everything. They were the embodiment of his remorse, the living scars of his obsession. The silence deepened, a delicate balance between the past and present, between the living and the dead. Elias's fingers trembled as they moved to close the notebook with a soft thud. The act was small, but monumental, a surrender, a recognition that some stories could not be rewritten to undo the damage. Outside, the night held its breath. Inside, the theater waited, suspended between ruin and redemption. As Elias rose slowly from the stage, the ghosts receded into the darkness, their forms growing dimmer but no less real. The silence remained, but it no longer felt like a shackle. It was a space for mourning, for memory, and perhaps for the first fragile step toward peace. Yet even in this quiet, a question lingered unspoken. Could Elias truly accept the weight of his past, or would the silence be shattered once more by the restless echo of obsession? The stage was empty now, but the story was far from over. And as Elias stepped into the shadowed corridors of the theater, the faintest flicker of hope stirred within him, fragile and uncertain as the dawn yet to come. The night stretched on, heavy with the weight of silence, but beneath it lay the trembling pulse of possibility, an ember waiting to be kindled. Elias knew the path ahead would be long and fraught with pain, but for the first time in years, he felt the faintest stirrings of clarity. He would face the ghosts. He would confront the past, and perhaps, in the stillness, find the redemption he so desperately sought. The theater held its breath, and the story waited to begin anew. The theater lay draped in silence, the heavy dust motes drifting like ghosts in the bleak shafts of pale light that dared to enter through cracked windows. Elias sat hunched over the scattered pages of his script, the ink bleeding into smudges beneath his restless fingers. The air was thick with the scent of aged wood and forgotten dreams. It was here, in the ruin of his own making, that Clara found him once again, her footsteps tentative but resolute against the hollow echoes. She paused a few feet away, her eyes tracing the worn contours of his face, etched with exhaustion and haunted by memories too deep for words. Elias, she began softly, voice barely more than a whisper, you don't have to carry this alone. He looked up, those dark, haunted eyes meeting hers with a flicker of recognition and pain. I have to, he replied, voice rough like gravel. It's the only way I can make sense of it all. Clara stepped closer, her presence a balm and a storm all at once. But at what cost? You think this obsession saves them, saves you, but it's breaking us both. I've given so much that you never saw. A tremor passed through her, a fragile tremble of raw emotion. I stayed away for years, she confessed, because it hurt too much to watch you burn. But I never stopped hoping you'd come back to me, to the world we once dreamed of. Elias's gaze faltered, the weight of her words pressing against the walls of his defenses. I'm so sorry, Clara, he murmured, voice cracking under the strain of unspoken regrets. I never meant to drag you into this. She shook her head, a sad smile touching her lips. You did drag me in. But I stayed because I love you. Because I believe there's still light somewhere beneath all this darkness. For a moment, the ghosts that haunted the theater seemed to hold their breath, the pale figures of the spectral cast shimmering faintly in the periphery, their silent sorrow reflecting the fragile hope blossoming between the two living souls. Elias reached out, fingers trembling as they hovered near hers, hesitant to bridge the chasm forged by years of pain and silence. Yet, just as their hands seemed destined to meet, he recoiled, retreating into the sanctuary of his scripts, the endless rewriting that had become both his prison and his penitence. I can't, he whispered, eyes averted. Not yet. Clara's heart clenched, understanding the depth of his torment, yet aching to pull him back from the brink. Then I'll wait, she said softly, her voice a vow wrapped in sorrow, but I won't give up on you. The theater seemed to exhale, a subtle shift in the air as if acknowledging the fragile thread of hope woven through the despair. Outside, the wind stirred the broken leaves, carrying with it whispers of redemption and the promise of dawn. Yet within, Elias remained locked in his relentless cycle, the ghosts of the past circling ever closer, and Clara's sacrifice lingering like a fragile flame in the darkness. As the night deepened, the script lay open once more, Elias's pen poised to carve new paths through old wounds. The stage awaited its next act, one of sorrow, sacrifice, and a fragile hope that perhaps, one day, the cycle might finally be broken. But for now, the theater held its breath, caught between the past and the possibility of redemption, and Clara's love remained a quiet beacon against the consuming shadows. The night's silence was broken only by the soft scratching of Elias's pen, a sound that whispered both torment and the faintest promise of salvation. And somewhere, in the darkness beyond the broken stage, the ghosts watched and waited. The theater seemed to sag under the weight of its own history. Dust motes hung in the stale air, drifting lazily through the shafts of dim light that pierced the cracked windows. Elias Monroe stood alone in the lobby, the faded grandeur of peeling wallpaper and shattered glass a cruel reminder of what once was. His fingers trembled as he clutched the latest draft of his script, worn pages creased and stained with sweat and ink. The silence was broken by the sharp click of heels Marcus's arrival. Marcus entered with a purposeful stride, the dark suit he wore absorbing the dull light, his eyes cold and unyielding. Elias, he said, voice tight, this has to end. The theater is a ruin, a danger to anyone who sets foot inside. The city council is ready to revoke the license. You need to let go. Elias's jaw clenched, eyes flickering with exhaustion and defiance. You don't understand, he whispered, voice hoarse. This theater, this play, it's all I have left. I'm close, Marcus, close to fixing it. Fixing? You redestroying yourself, Marcus snapped, stepping closer, his breath sharp with accusation. You redragging everyone down with you. You think the ghosts will forgive you? They're not forgiving, Elias. They retrapped just like you. The flickering fluorescent bulb overhead sputtered, casting jittery shadows that danced across Marcus's face, making him appear less human, more specter. Elias took a shaky breath, trying to steady the storm inside. I have to try. Marcus shook his head, disgust mingling with pity. Then you were lost. The confrontation left Elias hollow, the echoes of Marcus's words bouncing through the empty halls. He retreated deeper into the theater, the warped boards of the stage creaking beneath his feet. The ghostly cast was already assembling in the dim light, spectral forms flickering like candle flames in the darkness. Suddenly, the stage erupted into chaos. The ghosts performed a violent, fragmented reenactment of the fire that had claimed their lives. Flames licked the edges of the stage, though no real fire burned. The air thickened with heat and smoke, the screams of the spectral actors overlapping in a cacophony of pain and terror. Elias stood frozen, watching the nightmare unfold, his heart pounding, his mind fracturing. Lena appeared at his side, her pale eyes wide with silent sorrow. Harold's shadow moved across the backdrop, the weight of the theater's history pressing down on every breath. Elias's hands shook as he tried to rewrite the script in his mind, desperate to soothe the ghost's torment. Later that night, Clara came to him. Her presence was a balm to his frayed nerves, soft and steady against the wild tempest consuming him. She found him in the back room, surrounded by scattered pages and empty bottles. "Elias," she said gently, "you don't have to do this alone. You can stop. You can find peace." He looked up, eyes haunted and wild. "I can't, Clara. If I stop, they'll be lost forever. And so will I." She reached out, taking his hand in hers, warm and real. "You're holding on to pain, not to them. Letting go doesn't mean forgetting. It means healing." But Elias pulled away, clutching his script like a lifeline. "I have to keep going." The next hours passed in oppressive silence. Elias sat alone on the stage, murmuring lines to himself, the words blurring into a stream of consciousness. Shadows twisted and lengthened, merging with his fractured thoughts. The theater seemed alive, breathing around him, a living relic caught between destruction and salvation. His mind spiraled deeper, the boundary between memory and nightmare dissolving. The ghost's cries echoed through the empty space, a haunting symphony of grief and rage. Elias's hands bled from frantic scribbling, eyes wild with obsession. In the depths of the night, as the first light of dawn threatened the darkness, Elias whispered to the empty seats, "I will make it right. I will bring you peace." But the theater held its breath, waiting for redemption, for release, or for the final breaking point. The cycle tightened around Elias like a noose, the ghost's torment growing with each passing moment. Outside, the world pressed in with cold, hard reality, embodied by Marcus's relentless campaign to shut down the theater and erase its painful memories. Elias stood at the crossroads of obsession and surrender, the weight of his past heavier than ever. Would he find the strength to break free, or would the stage that burned forever consume him whole? The theater groaned, the shadows lengthened, and the ghosts whispered in the dark. The breaking point was near. The air in the ruined theater was thick with dust and memory, the faint scent of old wood and faded velvet, pressing against Elias's senses like a tangible weight. As he stepped cautiously through the debris-strewn aisles, the floorboards groaned beneath his thin-soled shoes, a low, mournful sound that seemed to echo the theater's own weary breath. The cavernous space stretched before him, cavernous and hollow, yet alive in a way that defied its ruin. It was not merely a building. It was a vessel of echoes, a crucible where past and present mingled, and where pain and art were forever entwined. Elias's eyes, hollow beneath dark circles, scanned the dimness, catching glimpses of the stage once vibrant with life, now a skeletal frame shrouded in shadows. Faint motes of dust drifted in the slanting shafts of moonlight that filtered through cracked windows, catching the pale glow like tiny stars suspended in stillness. A chill brushed his skin, and in the corner of his vision, he caught movement, a flicker, a shimmer, a presence that made his breath hitch. Harold appeared again. The stagehand ghost was no more than a pale wisp of a man, dressed in tattered remnants of the old stage crew uniform, the fabric hanging loose and faded. His eyes were deep wells of sorrow, hollow yet somehow filled with a quiet endurance that spoke of countless nights spent in service to the theater's will. He moved with a deliberate grace, gliding over the cracked floorboards as if tethered to the theater's very soul. Elias watched, heart pounding with a mixture of awe and dread. Harold was more than a ghost. He was the theater's breath, its pulse, its lingering spirit. Each time he appeared, the air seemed to thicken with history and longing, the silence broken only by the soft creaking of old wood and the faint whisper of forgotten voices. The playwright's fingers trembled as he pulled an ancient script from his satchel, the pages yellowed and fragile. He settled at the cracked wooden desk near the stage's edge, the flickering candle casting long, dancing shadows that stretched like phantoms across the room. Harold hovered nearby, his gaze fixed on the fragile script, his presence a silent benediction. "Do you remember?" Elias whispered, voice rough and fractured. Harold's eyes glistened, And though no words came, the ghost's presence was a soft murmur of affirmation. The theater itself seemed to respond. A sudden gust stirred the tattered curtains, sending dust motes swirling in the pale light. The faint scent of smoke lingered, a cruel reminder of the fire that had claimed so much. Elias's breath hitched as he imagined the applause that once filled this space, the laughter, the tears, the rapt silence of an audience caught between reality and illusion. Now, only ghosts remained, trapped in a cycle of repetition and regret. Driven by a surge of desperate energy, Elias bent over the script, pen scratching feverishly across the fragile pages. Words poured from him like blood, each line a desperate attempt to mend what was broken, to rewrite the past and wrest control from the relentless tide of memory and guilt. Harold drifted closer, the ghostly figure a steady presence beside the playwright. Invisible to the living, but to Elias, Harold was a tether to the theater's heart, an embodiment of its endurance and sorrow. As the hours slipped by, the theater seemed to breathe with Elias, inhaling his pain and exhaling the echoes of lost dreams. The walls pulsed with a living energy, caught between destruction and salvation, decay and resurrection. But with each word written, the line between the living and the dead blurred further. Elias felt the weight of the theater's breath on his shoulders, a suffocating embrace that both crushed and sustained him. His obsession deepened. The theater was no longer just a place, it was a living, breathing entity that demanded sacrifice and devotion, and Elias was its willing prisoner. Outside the shattered windows, the night pressed in, cold and implacable. But inside, the theater stirred with life, fragile, spectral, and eternal. And Elias, haunted and consumed, continued to write. The candle flickered, casting one last long shadow before the flame steadied. The theater exhaled its timeless breath, and the stage waited, always waiting for the next performance. The cycle spun on, relentless and unyielding. And somewhere, deep in the silence, Harold watched. The theater breathed with a quiet that was almost sacred, the air thick with the ghosts of memory and the whispered remnants of forgotten lines. Elias Monroe sat alone beneath the shattered chandelier, its crystals dangling like fragile tears caught in the dim light. His hands trembled as he held the worn script, the pages stained with years of obsessive rewriting, the ink smudged where his fingers had traced the words in desperate hope. Around him, the spectral cast gathered, their forms shimmering faintly in the muted gloom. Lena stood by the cracked proscenium arch, her ethereal light casting soft shadows on the dust-laden floor. Harold lingered near the wings, the embodiment of the theater's long and sorrowful history. At the center, Adan, the lead ghost, moved silently, his eyes pools of sorrow and understanding. The actors began a silent performance, a tableau of intertwined sorrows. Their faces spoke without words: pain, longing, regret, but also, beneath it all, a fragile light, a glimmer of hope that shimmered like the first dawn after a storm. Elias's breath caught in his throat. For a moment, the oppressive weight of guilt loosened its grip, and he felt something he had not dared to hope for in years: redemption. Clara's voice broke through the stillness, soft yet resolute. "Elias," she said, stepping forward, her calm presence steadying the storm within him. "You don't have to carry this alone anymore. There's peace beyond this cycle. You must let it go." He looked up, eyes haunted but searching, meeting her steady gaze. "I can't," he whispered, "not yet. There's still more to write, more to fix." Her hands reached out, trembling with the weight of love and sacrifice. Sometimes the hardest act of creation is surrender. Adan approached then, his translucent form wavering like a candle flame in the dark. His voice was low, filled with both accusation and compassion. "Elias, we are not your punishment, nor your burden. We are the echoes of your pain, yes, but also of your love. Forgiveness is not forgetting. It is release." The theater itself seemed to breathe around them, the dust motes swirling like suspended memories in the pale light. Elias's heart pounded, caught between the desperate urge to rewrite and the whispered promise of peace. Yet as the ghost's hopeful glow flickered, shadows lengthened and deepened. The weight of the fire, the loss of his wife and friend, the endless nights of torment, they pressed in once more. threatening to snuff out the fragile light like dying embers. Alias sank back into his chair, the script slipping from his fingers. His mind spun with the fragile possibility